Hey Christina, hey Ellie, hey listeners of the Writer's Mindset podcast. My name is Daniel Willcocks. I am the founder of ActivatedAuthors.com, the CEO of Devil's Rock Publishing Limited. I am one of the co-founders of the Other Stories podcast and a host of a number of things along the way, a horror author, all these kind of things. But I have been invited very, very kindly by your host to answer the question, what is the biggest lesson you have learned when you published your first book? And so I am going to be a bit cheeky and I'm going to connect 4 points together around a central theme, because I think that there are so many lessons you can learn from publishing that first book. And not uniquely enough, mine are based around mindset, which I think is perfect for you guys. So here are my biggest lessons. Number 1, your friends and family likely won't read your book. I published my first book in 2015. I was incredibly worried about friends and family reading it because I'm a horror author, and obviously within that book are certain elements that aren't too nice. In general, I'm a nice guy, and so a lot of people weren't expecting me to become a horror author and to be writing this kind of stuff. So there was a real hesitation about putting stuff out there. What if I'm judged by my partner? What if my mum and dad disapprove? What if this? What if that? There were a lot of questions. And what I discovered when I released that book was, in terms of my family and friends, not a single person bought, downloaded, or read that book. And that sounds like a negative thing, but honestly, it was one of the most important lessons that I learned from the beginning, because that book wasn't for them. And actually, in them not reading it, what it allowed the book to do was to find the right readers. So as a horror author, I was writing for horror readers. None of these people were horror readers. And as I put it on Amazon, it was horror readers that found it. It was horror readers who had been part of my social media that had jumped on, that bought the book. And because of that, it meant that my algorithms were cleaner, and it meant that Amazon knew to promote the book to horror readers, rather than my mum, who reads a mix of like romance and thriller, and my dad that reads fantasy. Like, it was a blessing in disguise. So it really taught me the importance of finding the right readers and how you have to market to your genre. And just having 50 people on your mailing list is useless if they're all romance readers and I'm a horror author. So that's number 1. Number 2. Do not base your future success as an author on the success of your first book. There's a really weird dichotomy with the traditional model of what writing is and what it should be and what it is to become an author, because the path used to be you write a book, you hand that over to an agent or a publisher, the publisher puts it out, and all the stories are you make lots of money, you do very well, you are an author on that first book. Incidentally, it's very often not the first book. That author will have written loads of books previously, and it's that one that got them famous. If you're self-publishing, or if you're looking at being an independent author, that is a lightning bolt moment. There are very, very few authors that actually make it really big on that first book. Most of the time it's met with crickets, dozens of readers, or potentially hundreds of readers. It depends how you plan, how you research, and how you stack your promos when you put that book out. The way to make it as an independent author is to keep publishing and to keep writing books. If you have one book out, it's much harder to market and get people involved in that, because you don't have the money and the gravitas of big publishers. Whereas if you have 10 books, 15 books, 20 books, 50 books, you have all these things that are much more likely to grab people. If people like one, they'll like another, and that will multiply, and that's what we call exponential growth. So that really is the path of being an independent author, and that has been partly a key to my success, is just constantly putting books out, constantly building that reputation, constantly building that mailing list. It can be a slow grind, but that's really why I preach to the people in my Activated Authors community, why you have to be passionate, why you have to find something that you love to write about. Because if you're self-publishing, you're in this for the long game, and you don't want to be writing about stuff that you hate just to make money for about 5 years or so. Find something you're passionate about, play the long game, and understand that even if that book does meet crickets, you can write a new book, you can go under a pen name. There are so many ways to try again. As long as you're hungry to learn, and as long as you're passionate to continue, those are the 2 things that fundamentally help make an indie author successful. Within that, remember that publishing that first book is a beginning. It's not the end at all, although it does feel like it after putting months, potentially years into writing that book. It does feel very all-consuming, and once you've published that book, a lot of authors, rightly so, take that sigh, let it all out, and just relax for a moment. Once you publish that first book, that really is the beginning. That's where it starts. You now, going into point number 4, you know the process, so it should be a lot easier, or at least less mentally demanding, because there's far less unknowns in how to publish a book and get it up onto platforms. And so from that point, it then becomes easier to put more books out, to write more stories, to keep improving your craft, and it's just about continual growth. So there's a number of things there to spring off of. I've probably over-divulged my time. I can only apologise. But I'll quickly run through those again. Number 1, your friends and family likely won't read your book. That's not a bad thing. Number 2, do not base your future success of you as an author on your first book. Number 3, once you've published your first book, that's the beginning. Number 4, publishing gets easier over time. The more you do it, the more you get used to those mechanisms. Obviously, things like advertising methods and everything else changes, but the actual fundamentals of what it is to get your book up on a store and sold to readers doesn't really change all that much. And so that pressure of learning all that while you're trying to write a book goes, and it gets easier from there on. Apologies for the very lengthy answer. I thank you very much for inviting me on to answer this question. Hopefully you invite me back again. Best of luck to everyone publishing their first book, or if you've just done it, best of luck with all the success of how that book's going. And find myself at danielwillcocks.com, WILLCOCKS, or at activateauthors.com. And I will talk to you guys later. Thank you.